Hwedhel, Peder Konin.
The Tale of Peter Rabbit.
In terminus passius, if there's a Peder Konin bihan, hag agahano o flopsy, mopsy, los cotton, ha Peder. I'r driga gans agamam in glandewes in dan rethen saban pervras.
Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree.
Lebyn o fleches care in meth mistress Konin, goth byn mitten. Hwedhel mors than parco poa his and vonda, mes na rewch mors the lowarth Mester McGregor. Enna, if there's a droglam, gans agas taz. Goris in Hoggan the ev, gans Mistress McGregor.
Now, my dear, said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor.
Lemon, resewch his, and na rauch cavas dregen. If there's a V o mors in theirs.
Now, run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out.
Enna, Mistress Konin goth, ag Ameris canstel a e glaulen, a mors der and cause than popty. E brennes torth of ara, gwaneth ha pimp torthel corint.
Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns.
Flopsy, Mopsy, ha los cotton, hag o cynniges bichen da. Etha his and vonda, rag cuntal mordu.
Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries.
Mes Peder, hag o perthrog, a bunius distoch the lowarth Mester McGregor, ha strother in dan and yet.
But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate.
Kinsa, ever dibris nebis lettuce, ha thav frinkek. Hagena, ever dibris nebis redek.
First, he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes.
Hagena, othon gleres nebis clav, eth the gavas nebis persil.
And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley.
Mes, a drodden ben fram cucumber, pure rogue ev metia, mes Mester McGregor.
But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor?
Mr. McGregor, if ever worried dowdon a dowlin o plansa in mes cabbages yoink, mes ever lamas in ban a punyo was a Peder, o quavia racan, ag o cria in uchel, health ladder.
Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling, "Stop, thief!"
Peder Gomeris own ethec dresechen, ever bistenis all a draw than lowarth, rag every an cofsa and forth war lech than yet. Ever golas onen a escisio in misk and cabbages, hag an escis arrel in misk and patates.
Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes.
Was a agaheri, ever bunius war better gar a mors moi uscus, my bederve chrusas scusi in tin ma nirella et punya in rose grosfos in anthazuk, ha bos ketchis gans an botonio bras ware jerkin. Efo Jenkin glass, gans put on your breast, knoweth paran.
After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new.
Peder omrius the vos calis, hag ola dagro bras, mese ola o clewis gans nebis golvanes curve, and nagus orto perintanes, hag an gondorius the striva in rag.
Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself.
Mr. McGregor a ddydd enna gans corda, hag efa vinus I wara war ben Peder, mes Peder a onwenus in mes and dermin paran, o casere Jenkin war ilech.
Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him.
Ha resig a berth in cruel tulas, ha lammer a berth in Canadora, efa via tra deg rag am gudha, manifa chemis me a thorino.
And rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it.
Mr. McGregor o Sir Intien bos Peder neple in Crow Tulas. Morteza cyddes in dan bot bludgeon, efo ddalathus ag a threilia gans preda o miris in dan cetaponan. A lemon Peder struius, catishu! Mes eza, Mr. McGregor wrth y jasia a ddistwch.
Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Katishu! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time.
Hag oedd y saya gore I tros war beda. Never lamas in mes dre fenesta o tisefel 3 les, and fenesta o revihen rag Mr. McGregor, hag efo sgwith the bunio was o beda, efo the weles the I oba.
And tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work.
Peder a aseddus in nans rag poes. Efo dianoch hag o trembla deron, and inses a tibians man ddodo a biforth a coddus ddodo suya. Unwaith efo per lib diworth asedda in canana. Was a temen efo ddalathus gwandra o dro o mos lipti, na per ysgys o miris all a dro.
Peter sat down for a rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander around, going lippity, not very fast, and looking all around.
Efo gafas darasyn ffos, mes efo alweddus, nins es y spas rag Konin bihin tew, the strother in dano. Ithes y logosan goth o punya in hagin mes, dres yn cam daras men. O tegi pirs ha faf the id veilu in cwrs. Pedro wa finis o ti, and fourth than yet, mes, ithes a pisan per fras genzi in igano, han ne alas I gothebi, I shacius hifen auto, Peder a ddalathus ola.
After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity, not very fast and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she couldn't answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry.
Enna, ever a sias caffis I ffordd y drys yn loath in didro. Mes ever ddydd habos mwy ha mwy pendegus. Chwarae, ever ddydd the bol le mae rhwg Mester McGregor lynhe gana dora. If there's a canth win o legata wrth nebys pysgus o'r. Ie, sethys per gwsl. Mes treweithio blaid hi lost ha grenus cepal del fo byw. Peder y bryderus y ffia gwel mols the fes heb cawsl o ti. Efre glewsa in ceba cathys dwarth the gendero Benjamin Konin behen.
Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his watering cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny.
If either the lerch trohag and crow tulis, mes a distoch tam august lotho, ever glewis tros grabble, scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch, Peder fiscus in dan and prisk. Mes chwarae, dreffen na chwalfa trefeth, ever thirth in mes, hag esgino war rabath ros, hag gikiena. And kinsa tra welas evo Mester McGregor, o crava onion. I gain o trelius troha Peder, adresto ithesa and yet.
He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peder scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate.
Peder ydi skinus pyrindison de worth and rabath ros, a daleth punius scaffagala a his care di dro a driv nebis prisk corrent du. Mester McGregor a gatchus gwel an otho orthan gornal, mes Peder o diggerth ever sincus in dan and yet, a would tuith sallow o ev in cause in mares and loa.
Peter got down very quietly from the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go, along a straight walk behind some blackcurrant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter didn't care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden.
Mester McGregor a grogus and Jenkin bihen, hag an esgysio abo boca loath, like Dora own in mochi du.
Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds.
Peder ni hedys james punio pomiris wore lech, bis mai trehedys ev tre than saben vras. Evo marth squeeth del gudus ev warnans warren tewis meddwl, weg, war lur and tol Konin at gea ideu legus. Idam o busy o kegi. Here o womvis o wavinis pith rerusa ev gans iddilas. Itho Anessa Jenkin bihen had dew esgus recolsa, Peder dres dew sathan.
Peter never stopped running or looked back behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon a nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight.
Drog again ev leverol nago Peder pyrtha dres an gorthua. I vam an goras in gweli a gul nep te cameo. Ha hia ros dogen anotho the beda. Res you cameras un loas moors orth prys gweli.
I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea. She gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime.
Ys Flopsy Mopsy ha los cotton a gafas bara ha leth ha mordu rag sopa. And doeth.
But Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. Nos da.